on my YouTube channel, and oh, look, doesn't it look cool? And do I think about the artists that went behind it? Of course I don't. Now, I do think about the people that created the technology to do that. But then I gave my wife an example of Van Gogh. I love Van Gogh's art. I think it's wonderful. I have several of his pieces in my house, but not that he painted. I have several pieces that have been duplicated as a digital print that I bought. So then the question becomes, well, who are they ripping off now? Somebody's not getting credit for that work. I mean, yeah, it's his name attached to it, but Van Gogh's gone, and I highly doubt his family's getting royalties off that digital print I've got hanging on my wall of Starry Night. You know, or I think it's famous. Maybe it's not to everybody. The Star Wars version of Starry Night. I've got that one.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know, AI essentially does what a human being has already done. Is a Star Wars fan looked at Starry Night and said, "Man, I could take that and I can recreate it to look like Van Gogh, but it's going to have a Star Wars motif." So where do we draw the line about what's acceptable and not? And because people have their time, effort, energy, and talent invested in these creations, and this is their livelihood, then of course most people are going to tend to draw the line at, well, if a human did it, then it's okay. But if a human's not doing it, it's not okay.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a fine distinction that you're going to be hard pressed to, prove to me that computers aren't already doing that.
That's a really good point, Patrick. I like a lot of that resonates with me. Let's look at it in terms of labor, which is something that you mentioned. Maybe I can do a song in 30 minutes in FL Studio. And you look at the amount of money that I would get paid to compose an original song, and maybe it, like I said, it took me 30 minutes to make it, but how many years did it take leading up to be able to do it in that 30 minutes? So there is an investment of time at the front end that people don't really consider, right? And when you talk about the instant feedback that you're getting from artificial intelligence, it really does tend to, be diminutive to the amount of skill and effort that people sometimes dedicate a life to. When you look at something like Vincent van Gogh, like maybe you're an art student, maybe you went to fine art school and you looked at the work of Monet and you looked at the work of Picasso and you even looked at the shitty work of Sidney Pollock or whatever, and all of those lived experiences you're pulling influence from. You reference this here, you absorb this here, and then your output is essentially your creativity plus everything that you've consumed leading up to that point, which in a lot of ways, that is what artificial intelligence is doing just within an instant. So to your point, when you talk about the difference between a person doing it and artificial intelligence doing it, a lot of people will lean heavily on the argument that artificial intelligence is not creative, it can't do anything new. And a philosophical question that I've had is like, are we as people capable of truly doing anything new?
And now you just hit on the I think the crux of the argument. There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
I've sat down, we both play guitar in a really common, like a 1-5-6-4 chord progression. You sit down and you play a D, an A, a B minor, and a G, and you loop those, just get an acoustic guitar out, loop them at about 120 beats a minute, and have somebody walk by. And everybody that walks by, I've done this, and somebody walks by and says, "Hey, isn't that Three Doors Down Kryptonite?" And I'm like, yeah, it is. And then somebody walks by and says, "Hey, isn't that Keith Urban?" Yeah, it is.
It's a great point.
Hey, isn't that Stained? Oh, yeah, it is. And it's like they hear what they want to hear from that chord progression. And I've got songs I've written to that chord progression, but to speak to that, even though that song is of my mind and my creation, where did I pull it from? I ultimately have been influenced by people that came before me. I don't want to say that we're beyond original inventions, but I mean, the last original invention, I mean, if you want to call it original, the internet.
Yeah.
The automobile, the internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
Well, now here we are with AI. And I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole of what's scary, but I mean, there's already There's already instances where they've proven that the AI is actually lying to the people that are handling it and trying to protect itself. That's scary.
That's where it gets to be even more real world implications from it. Is the Hollywood part, it may seem trivial, and in a lot of ways it is when you're talking about national security and defense and things like that. But I do think it all kind of feeds into the same conversation. So to your point, music theory is the math behind music. It's the absolute. It's the thing that is essentially truth, right? But then you get these fantastic jazz musicians that they know the structure, they know the form, and they fuck with it. They go and they play these dissonant notes or notes that don't typically fit in the progression. You look at a blues player, and while he may be playing a pentatonic scale, maybe he bends the strings in a certain way, maybe he plucks and his ring finger isn't as efficient as the rest, and it leaves like a really distinct fingerprint on the actual way that the song sounds. And that is the human element that I wonder if AI will ever be able to replicate, because it doesn't have those same, essentially it doesn't have taste. It only has an amalgam of what it approximates to be taste, because even the term AI is deceiving. It's not artificial intelligence. It's basically just taking a complex algorithm that's able to pull from every single resource on the internet and give you an educated guess as to what you're after. So I don't think screenwriting is there yet, but I understand the writer desire to not want to accelerate this technology.
Well, it's a self-protective mechanism. When we find a means of generating income, generating wealth, generating value with what we do, of course, we want to protect that. We call it job security.
Yeah.
And disruptive technologies take away the security of the means to generate a wealth to self-sustain. Now you become reliant on something else. And, I'll use something that's completely unrelated to the work world. Bruce Lee, one of my favorite philosophers, not just martial artists, but philosopher and humanitarian. And he met so much pushback in the martial arts community because of traditionalism. Masters felt threatened that the quote-unquote secrets of their styles and arts were going to be revealed, and that people would not have to come to them and be beholden anymore for this knowledge that they were the gatekeepers to. And he tore down so many walls between civil rights and racism and just his philosophy of life in general. And it really, what it just comes down to, it all boils down to this self-protective mechanism of, I don't think it's that people thought what he was doing was wrong. It was, hey, you're messing with my livelihood here, bro.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. I respect what you're saying about disruption and how it creates new opportunities for people. The idea that you can take a writer and take that away from them and then say, well, you can learn how to write code for artificial intelligence, I don't think that that's necessarily equal, right?
No. So, and this is something I'm going to get into in a side thought process that I told my wife, because somebody had played for me some artificial intelligence. AI had recreated Kurt Cobain on some music, and I loved it because, oh my goodness, here's Kurt Cobain. Okay, well, first off, Kurt Cobain's dead. So they're not taking anything from him. Like, he's dead. Like when they deep fake, Carrie Fisher in Star Wars, she was passed away. So it took nothing from Kurt Cobain and what he did. If anything, I felt like it paid homage to him. But what that artificial intelligence can never do for me is they can't put Kurt Cobain in front of me and let Kurt Cobain be Kurt Cobain and perform for me. That will never happen, ever.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to the music, you brought up music at the very beginning of this. Yes, if I hear an AI generated song that speaks to me, am I going to enjoy it without thinking of the repercussion to musical artists? Absolutely, 100%. But there's something visceral about going in person to a concert. I went and finally, you talked about blues, Joe Bonamassa. I finally got to see Joe Bonamassa in concert at the Ryman in Nashville. And even a CD that he created, which, let's talk about, computers went into creating some of that sound. Even a CD that he created could not compare to what I heard in person live. And artificially generated music cannot compare to that live performance. You remember, I think it was, oh God, I can't remember the rapper that everybody
Tupac.
thinks is alive, Tupac.
Yeah.
They came up with a hologram of Tupac. It didn't go over well. Nobody cared because
No.
it wasn't Tupac.
It was also, to devil's advocate, it was also years ago. I do have a legitimate, I can envision a future where they can approximate the experience close, especially if you're in the nosebleeds, where like, and that song that you're talking about, Drowned by the Sun, that Nirvana AI song, it is phenomenal. And
It is.
I think as a consumer, okay, so on the business side, I don't not understand why the writers are doing what they're doing. I do understand why the corporations are doing what they're doing, because content is the most important commodity for a lot of these streaming services. They just want to crank shit out. So I do think it's almost unrealistic for writers to say, hey, don't utilize this technology that every other major business in the world is just chomping at the bit to get involved with. And when you're talking about like Flip My House, New Housewives of New Jersey, all of that crap, it's like, have artificial intelligence write it. I don't give a shit. I do think that when it comes to prestige television, like let me just use House of the Dragon, for example, Stranger Things, Succession, I think that it will diminish the artistry of it, but I don't see why you should reject it as a tool.
Yeah, and to speak to that, I appreciate artists regardless of whether I enjoy their art, because
Okay.
I know the effort that goes behind it. But let's be 100. These TV shows that are based off of the artistic writing creation of writers like George R.R. Martin. Okay, I've never watched anything past the first 2 episodes of Game of Thrones in season 1. I read all the books, and the moment I have yet to see, other than Lord of the Rings, and this is blasphemy, I know, but I still think that the Lord of the Rings books the Lord of the Rings movies by Peter Jackson are better than the books.
All right.
And I
Bold
know
choice.
that's blasphemy, but I have yet to see any TV show based off the writings of somebody else actually deliver what the fans needed and wanted. Because they always tried to, because of the artistic expression of those artists, they always tried to make it their own, because it wasn't their own. It was not their creation. They took somebody else's creation and said, let me put my own artistic flair onto this thing, and I'm going to present it to the masses, and some people enjoy it, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to, there's already a fan base for that creation, and we're fan bases of that creation, and now you've essentially, I'm going to use the word, you've perverted that creation in your own image, and you wonder why I don't like it. Well, it's not that I dislike the effort and the art that you put into it. It wasn't your creation to begin with. So a lot of writers are basically, in my philosophical opinion, they're being faced with a mirror where they're having to look in a mirror now and say, this is what you've been doing all along.
Interesting.
And now when they see it, they don't like it because it's yucky and it doesn't feel good. Now, it's easy for me to say that because I am not a creator. I'm not an artist. That is not what I do. I've never pretended to understand. I can sympathize, but I can't empathize. I see what my wife does, and for me, it's very boring. She sees what I do, and for her, it's very boring. But I can appreciate the effort that goes behind it. And I do. I like seeing what artists create. But for the most part nowadays, and people have said it, what are we creating that's new? We just keep repackaging the same crap again and again and again.
The live performance, I think that's a really valid point, and that's something that it is going to take years to refine. I've actually got 2 videos that I'm in the process of completing. One is a House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 1, written by ChatGPT. I've gone in and grabbed footage from previous episodes and, kind of done the best I could to recreate what's happening in the scenes. And it sounds like an episode of House of the Dragon, but it doesn't move the plot forward in any meaningful way. It makes up character names. But again, if you use it as a tool, if you embrace the technology, if you don't turn or bury your head in the sand and you instead say, you know what? this could save me hours on the front end, and then I can go in and I can refine and I can polish, or I can adjust the prompts, or say, this is my vision. I've taken, and I'll show you, Patrick, I've actually got a really cool outline for a story that I was like, I want this, and this. How do we make it happen? And it put together a synopsis for me. And I'm like, I don't really like this, and I need to explain how these events came to pass. I need to flesh out like the origin or whatever. And it went in and it did that for me. And now I have something more tangible to go on. I would never pass it off and say, hey, here's a story that I wrote, but it is a really good foundation. So I think as a tool, it can be utilized. So to say we don't want it in the writer's room is kind of just creating this contention between the studios and the writers that I don't know that can be reconciled, because if the writers' days are numbered, they're not doing themselves any favors by further rejecting the future. So I'm going to bring it back home, close to home. My wife, I've seen her actually embrace this technology. Part of some of her clients have a demand for, they like things that appear to be, hand drawn. And my wife can use these digital pens with the Mac stuff that basically she creates, her own calligraphy and handwriting and designs that then go into her designs. Well, she's got some technology now that she's downloaded that she can create her own fonts in the real moment and refine them with this technology. Now, this isn't artificial intelligence. You still have to work it, but it's return on time invested, ROTI. And what happens is now that she is, I remember watching her for a whole week create these fonts and symbols and letters and shapes and wingdings and whatever you want to call them, and she got done. And now if somebody's wanting her handwriting in that design, they literally come in, she just opens it up and says, click, click, click. She just types it out on the computer with a regular keyboard, but it grabs all of her handwriting that she's previously created. So we could argue that she's not creating anything now. She's just typing on a keyboard. And the big difference in this in this example, I should say, is that she didn't use something that was artificially generated. She did generate that. Yeah.
But now the payoff is she doesn't have to continue generating that.
It's automation. Absolutely. And there you have it. I mean, it's a complicated topic, and I think that there is really no wrong opinion to have on the subject. So with that said, I would love to hear from you. Also, you can check down in the description. I'll post a link to both of their channels, as well as the companion piece to this video, so that you can hear more than one side of the story. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, take a second to click the thumbs up button. And if you want to subscribe, you're already here. All you got to do is click the button, and you can stay up to date with even more conversations like this one. Thanks a lot for coming by. I'm Jeremy. And until next time, be terrible.